Welcome to another class of dealing with the straight line, where we will deal with the straight line. And the straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points. The straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points. Now, if we have here, we have point A and we have a point B. And the straight line forms this distance between point A and point B. And each point here is represented by a coordinate, an x and a y coordinate. Here we have point A represented by the coordinate xy, and point B represented by the coordinate x2, y2. Now here we have x1, y1, and x1 and y1. Now why we put 1 and 2 there is just to differentiate between the 2 points. Differentiate between the 2 points. So point A is x1, y1. Point B is x2, y2. So one of the first things we need to know is to find the distance between 2 points in a straight line. Find the distance between 2 points in a straight line. And the formula to find the length of a straight line, or the distance between 2 points on a straight line, is given by x2 minus x1 plus y2 minus y1. x2 minus x1 plus y2 minus y1 squared. Right? x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. And if this sounds familiar, it is, because when we were doing the Pythagoras Theorem, we had a formula similar to this. We had used the formula similar to this, because if we notice that AB is the hypotenuse of our right angle triangle. AB is the hypotenuse of our right angle triangle. And so since it's a right angle triangle, Pythagoras theorem is used in this way to find the length of AB. So if we have x2 minus x1, that tells us it's the distance from this point to this point. That distance here is represented from here, this point of our triangle, to here, by x2 minus x1. And the distance from here to the top of the triangle, that is represented by y2 minus y1. When we subtract that, we have the distance from here up to that point. So that is why we can use this Pythagoras theorem to help us to find the length of a straight line. Now, the next thing we need to talk about is the midpoint. The midpoint is the coordinate that is at the center of the 2 points. That's in the middle of those 2 points. So A and B, there is one point that stands in the middle, and we need to find that. And to find that, we use our formula. And that formula says x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and the y coordinate is y1 plus y2 divided by 2. And we will get our midpoint. All right? Then we have the gradient of the line. The gradient of the line is the slope of the line. Gradient of the line is the slope of the line. It tells us how the line is slanted, right? How the line is slanted. You know, sometimes you walk up the hill and some hills are steeper than others, or if you walk up a step, some steps are steeper than others. So the gradient tells us how steep, right, our line is, the slope of our line. All right, so we will work some examples in our next video to calculate the length of the straight line, the midpoint of the line, and the gradient of the line. All right, welcome to another class of doing the straight lines, coordinate geometry, the straight line. And in our last class, we talked about the formulas to calculate the length of a straight line, the midpoint of the straight line, and the gradient of the straight line. So before we go any further, let's remind ourselves of those formulas. The first formula, let's talk about the length of the straight line. Remember that the length between any 2 points, let's say the length between A, B, is given by the formula the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. Alright, so that is the formula for the length of a straight line. Then we talked about the midpoint of a line, the midpoint of the line. And we said the midpoint is given by the formula midpoint is equal to x1 plus x2 over 2 and y1 plus y2 over 2, right? So we have our midpoint there. And then the formula for our gradient, represented by the letter M, all right? This letter M, and again, in our, a little further down in our videos, we'll talk more about that letter M. So, but this M represents gradient, and the gradient is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So, what we will do, we will use these formulas to complete these examples, to find the length, the gradient, and the midpoint of our AB, which is 7, 4. A is the point 7, 4, and B is the point 12, 2. All right, so let's use our formulas to complete this. So let's start with calculating the length of AB. AB is equal to, remember we have our formula here, x2 minus x1. So x2, so here we will have, this will be x1 and y1. And the next point will be x2, y2. So all the first values for x, we will use those as x1. So x1, y1, and x2, y2. And that will help us to be able to substitute our values correctly. All right? So AB, notice, remember the length of AB is x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So let's begin to work. And if you feel confident enough to find the gradient, the midpoint, and the length by yourself, you can pause the video and do so, and then check the answers when we are completed. So the first point, 7, 4. So in here, x2, which will be 12, 12 minus x1, which is 7, squared, plus 2, which is y2, right? y2 is 2 here, minus 4, all square. All right? So let us simplify and work. So here we will have the square root of 5, or 12 take 7 will give us 5 squared, plus 2 take 4 will give us negative 2 squared. So that will give us the square root of 25 plus 4. Right? Negative 2 times negative 2 will give us positive 4. Is equal to the square root of 29. So what we need to do now is find the square root of 29, and we will get the answer for the length of the line. So you can use your calculators to do that, and you could write it about 2 decimal places, and so you can put in your answer there. The square root of 29 will give us 5.39 5.39 units. Alright? Now, why we put units? We don't know if the measure is in meters, centimeters, millimeters. So here we put 5.3 unit. Whatever unit we're measuring it in. So that is to find the length of the line, length of AB. So next we will the next thing we'll do is find the midpoint of AB, the midpoint of AB. Now the midpoint. Let's remind ourselves that the midpoint is x1 plus x2 divided by 2 and y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So x1 again is 7. So the midpoint is equal to x1 plus x2. So x1 will be 7, x2 will be 12. So that will give us 7 plus 12 divided by 2, and the y value will be y1 plus y2, which will be 4 plus 2 divided by 2. So that will give us, which is equal to 7 plus 12 will give us 19 over 2, and 4 plus 2 will give us 6 over 2, which when we reduce that, 19 divided by 2 will give us 9.5, and 6 divided by 2 will give us 3. So the midpoint, the coordinate of the midpoint will be found at 9.5 and 3. So now we have to find our gradient. We have to find the gradient. And the gradient is given y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So let's substitute our values there. y2 is 2. 2 take y1, which is 4, over x2, which is 12, take x1, which is 7. Which when we reduce that, we will get 2 take 4 will give us negative 2, and 12 take 7 will give us 5. So the gradient of this line is negative 2 over 5. So what you can do is pause the video and try the second example and see if you're able to do that and get it correct. Let's look at example number 2. Example number 2, where we have CD, the line CD, and we have the coordinate of C, which is negative 3, 7, and the coordinate of D, which is 8, negative 4. So first, let's find our length. The length of the line CD. Alright? Remember, our formula is x2 minus x1 all squared plus y2 minus y1 all squared. So let us substitute our values for C and D. Let's substitute the values there for C and D. So x2 here will be 8, and x1 will be negative 3. So 8 take negative 3 squared plus y2, which is negative 4, negative 4 take 7 squared. Alright? So remember to be careful with our signs. Remember, when a negative and a negative comes together like this, it becomes an addition. So here we will now have 8 plus 3. So 8 plus 3 will give us 11 squared plus negative 4 take 7 will give us negative 11 squared. All right? Now, some persons might say, you know what? Wouldn't that give us 0? But once we square a negative, it will give us a positive. So don't forget that. So this will be negative, or 11 squared will give us 121. Negative 11 squared will give us positive 121. So now we need to find the square root of 242. So check your calculators for the square root of 242. Square root of 242, which will be approximately 15.56 units. All right, and there we have our answer. Now what you can do is pause the video and try to do the midpoint and the gradient to see if we have the same answer when we work it. Okay, let us continue to find the midpoint of our line. So CD, we still with CD, so we now have to find the midpoint. And remember, our midpoint is x1 plus x2 divided by 2, y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So the midpoint is equal to x1, in this case, x1 is negative 3. Negative 3 plus x2, which is 8, divided by 2, and y1, which is 7, plus negative 4, divided by 2. So, what will we have? We will have negative 3 plus 8, which will be positive 5, since the bigger number is positive. The two signs are different. So if the two signs are different, we subtract and the answer takes the sign of the bigger number. So we have negative 3 and a positive 8. So negative 3 plus 8, which will give us 5. And since the 8 is positive, it will give us positive 5. Positive 5 over 2. And 7 plus negative 4. The two signs are different. Here we have a positive 7 and a negative 4. So we subtract. So that will give us positive 3. And since the 7 is larger, our answer will be a positive number. So that will give us 3 over 2. So dividing that, we will have 2.5 and 1.5. So the midpoint will be found at 2.5 and 1.5. Now to find the gradient. So our gradient, remember our gradient, y2 take y1. So y2 in this case is negative 4. So negative 4 take y1, which is 7, and x2, which is 8, take x1. Now here, remember, x1 is negative 3. So 8 take negative 3. Right? 8 take negative 3. So that will give us negative 4 take 7 will give us negative 11. 8 take 3. 8 take negative 3. The negative and the negative will be positive. So this will give us 8 plus 3. Right? This will become 8 plus 3. And that will give us positive 11. And the negative divided by a positive, our answer will be a negative. So negative 11 divided by positive 11, our answer will be negative 1. Alright, so the gradient of this line is negative 1. So what you could do again, pause the video, check and do number 3 and see if you will get the same answer as we will have when we are completed working. All right, so now we are about to work our third example, finding the length of the line. So here we will have to find EF, the length of EF. So we put our square root sign, and remember it is xy, x2 take x1. So in this case, x2 is 4. 4 take x1, which is negative 5, squared plus y2, which is 7, take negative 2 squared. Right? Now, one point to note is that when we are finished squaring, we must always have a positive number. So, when we square a number, it must always give us a positive value, So first, let us work our brackets. So that will give us the square root of negative 4 take 4 take negative 5. The negative and negative will give us a positive here. So that will give us 4 plus 5. And 4 plus 5 will give us 9 squared. And again, the same thing here. 7 take negative 2. The negative and negative will give us a positive value there. So 7 plus 2 will give us 9. 9 squared. So, which will be 9 squared, which is 8 to 1, plus 8 to 1, which will give us a square root of 162. So check your calculators and find the square root of 162. The square root of 162 will be approximately 12.73. 12.73 units. Alright, 12.73 units. So if you have that, if you worked it by yourself and you got the answer, congratulations. Now let's check to see what the answer will get when we calculate the midpoint. So remember our midpoint, x1 plus x2 divided by 2 and y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So x1 here is x1 is negative 5. So negative 5 plus 4 divided by 2 and negative 2 negative 2 plus 7 divided by 2. Alright, so that answer will give us negative 5 plus 4. Since we have a negative and positive, we subtract, which will be 1, and since the 5 is negative and the 5 is greater, it will be negative 1. So negative 1 over 2, and here again we have negative 2 plus 7. Since the 2 is negative, the 7 is positive, we will subtract, and the answer takes this sign of the bigger number. So negative 2 negative 2 plus 7, that will give us 5, and since the 7 is positive, it will be positive 5 over 2. So our coordinate will be negative half and 2.5. Alright, and then to find our gradient will be, which is equal to y2 minus y1. So y2 is 7. 7 take y1, which is negative 2, over x2, which is 4, take x1, which is negative 5. Again, when negative and negative come like this, it becomes a positive. So what we end up with is 9 divided by 9, which will give us 1. So the gradient here is 1. So I hope you are getting the same answers as we are when we are working it out. So let's now do our final example. The final example to find the distance G between the points G and H. Find the distance between the points G, H. So here we have GH, the square root of x2 minus x1. So here x2 is negative 6. Negative 6 take x1, negative 3 squared, and then negative 15 take negative 8 squared. Now here, when negative and a negative come, remember that becomes a positive. The same here, when negative and negative come, that becomes a positive. So we could rewrite this as the square root of negative 6 plus 3 all squared plus negative 15 plus 8 all squared. Alright? So let us simplify this. So negative 6 take 3 will give us negative 3 squared. Sorry, negative 6 plus 3 will give us negative 3, right? Two signs are different. The 3 is positive, the 6 is negative, so we subtract. And the sign takes the answer takes the sign of the bigger number, which is negative, and then same here. Plus negative 15 plus 8, since the 8 is positive, the negative and the 15 negative we subtract, and the answer takes the sign of the bigger number. So we will have negative 7 squared. Alright, so that will give us negative 3 squared is 9, plus negative 7 squared is 49, and we will add that up. We will have the square root of 58. The square root of 58. So you could work out, just check your calculators and find the square root of 58. Alright, the square root of 58 will give us square root of 58 is approximately 7.62 units. And there we have the how to find the length, the midpoint, and gradient of 2 points on a straight line. In our next class, we'll begin talking about the equation of a straight line, the equation of a straight line.